Hi, I'm Liz from No Trace. In this video, I'm going to show you how to fix a hole in a blanket. Now, if you take a look at this fuzzy brown blanket, you can see that it's made up of 2 layers of fabric, and they've actually started to separate here along the seam, and I have a hole here, about 6-inch hole here. I have a second hole in the seam somewhere else. Let's find it. Here we go. Oh, I actually have 3 holes. Awesome. Here's a hole that's about 5 or 6 inches, and then here's a much larger hole that's closer to 2 feet. So I'm going to show you how to fix these holes using your sewing machine and how to do it sewing it by hand. For this project, you are going to need a needle and some thread. If you have a sewing machine, you might also be able to use your sewing machine. It just depends how large the hole is in your blanket. So this blanket's really large hole, I can sew up most of the way on the sewing machine, and let me show you how to do that. So all you need to do if you have a large hole like this is to turn your blanket wrong side out through the hole, and then we can sew up that opening at the sewing machine. Now, if this is your only hole in your blanket, you need to leave an opening so that you can turn your blanket right side out when you're finished. Since this blanket has 2 other holes, I can sew this hole up on the machine all the way. So let me move my camera so you can see how to sew it. All right, so we're over at my Juki now, and the blanket is wrong side out, and you can see some very interesting fuzz on the inside of the blanket there. So if you wanted, you could iron this part of your blanket so that it lays nice and flat. This is an acrylic blanket. I don't really want to iron it because you have to iron it at a really low heat so it doesn't melt. So I'm just doing my best here to line up the raw edges with each other. And you can see where the original seam was, where there's some thread that has come out. So you want to start your new stitches, if you're doing it this way, you want to start them further away from the hole. So we're going to start sewing about a 1/2 inch or so away from where the hole begins. And you want to make sure to do a back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And you might want to pin your fabric together. That is just your personal preference. If you're newer to sewing, you probably want to pin your fabric together. If you're more confident, you can just go for it. Okay, I'm getting near the end of the hole. Now remember, if this is the only hole, you need to leave an opening so you can turn your blanket right side out. Since this blanket has multiple holes, I'm going to sew over the stitches that are still intact, which you can't really see, but I'm going to sew over them and do a little back stitch about a 1/2 inch up or so. Okay, so now you can pretty much see, hopefully, my new seam that I made. There it is. You can kind of see it on this side too. So in the next step, I'm going to show you how to fix a hole using a needle and thread. So for that case, I want my blanket right side out again. So I'm going to reach into the hole, one of the 2 remaining holes. I guess I could have sewn this hole up as well. Now, depending on how thick your blanket is, you want to make sure that the hole is large enough to turn it wrong side out and right side out if you do use your sewing machine. You need to leave a big enough opening to get it back for the hand stitching. And the hand stitching we're going to do is an invisible stitch. I've also used this stitch to fix stuffed animals. I have a tutorial on here for how to fix a stuffed animal using an invisible or a ladder stitch. I'm going to link to that right here if you also have a stuffed animal that needs a little repair. Okay, so looking here at one of the remaining holes, I am going to use a needle and thread. I'm using a contrasting color so that hopefully you can see it a little better on your video screen, on your phone or your laptop. Let me know where you're watching this from. Are you on your laptop or desktop? Or are you watching it on a tablet or a phone? Leave a comment. Let me know how you're seeing this. Okay, so I have threaded a piece of thread through the needle and I folded it over. So I have 2 strands of thread here to work with. And I'm going to tie a couple of knots at the back end of the thread. And this will also depend, the size of your knot will depend on your fabric. So if the weave of your fabric is kind of loose and open, you're going to need a larger knot. If your fabric, the fabric of your blanket is a tighter weave, you won't need quite as many knots. So I'm doing about 4 knots and hopefully my thread won't pull through. All right, so there is my little knot. So the way a hidden stitch works is that we are sewing along the folded edge of the fabric. So each side of this blanket has a folded edge, and the fuzzy side of this blanket, the folded edge, is a little bit harder to see, but it's there. And I'm going to take my needle and go into the inside of the blanket, and I'm going to come out right along this folded edge on one side. So I'm coming from the inside of the blanket to the outside of the blanket, and I'm going to start right where the tear begins. And I'm going to pull my needle through. So now my knot is on the inside of the blanket under this fold. And now I want to go across the opening here to the other piece of fabric into the other fold. Like I said, this is a fuzzy fabric. It doesn't have a super tidy fold. So I'm going to do my very best to approximate the fold. And I'm going to go into the fuzzy fabric, and I am grabbing a little pinch, about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch pinch of fabric, and pulling the thread through. So now the thread's coming out of the fuzzy fabric. Now I want to go across the gap again into the fold of the smoother fabric and grab a little pinch right at the fold. So hopefully you can kind of see that there. Again, it's about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in there, and pull it. Okay. And now my thread is on the other side of the opening. So what I want to do is just keep going back and forth. I'm going to show you another stitch so that you can hopefully get a good view. So I'm going to go back into the fuzzy fabric. Once again, I'm grabbing a little pinch of fuzzy fabric, pulling the thread through. And you can see here when my stitches are loose that it's kind of like a little ladder. They're kind of going back and forth. And obviously we want to tighten them so you can't see them. But I just want to keep going. I'm going to show you one more. Going across the gap into the folds, grab a little pinch of fabric with the needle just in the fold, push it back through, and pull it nice and tight. All right, I'm going to keep sewing this hole, and when I get to the end, I'm going to show you how to finish it. One thing I want to point out, in case I forgot to point it out already, is that when you're pulling your needle out and across, you are trying to go directly across the gap. So my needle came out here. I'm trying to go straight across the gap to the other piece of fabric. That's when your thread gets hidden. If it's going directly across, straight across the gap, straight across the hole from side to side. So you want to try to go as straight across as you can. Okay, now I've made it all the way across the opening, the tear in my blanket, and I want to show you how to tie a knot at the very end. So once you have made it across the opening, you can see here that the hole is now gone and my stitches are mostly hidden. So the next thing to do to tie the knot, you're going to want to go back and find a nearby stitch. So you can just sort of gently pull at the opening, find a nearby stitch, and you're going to take your needle, you're going to go under that stitch to create a small loop. Okay, so there is a little loop in my thread, and then I want to go into the loop to create a knot. And just pull the loop tight, pull the thread tight. I'm going to do that a second time. I'm going to go under the stitch, which is right there, to create a small loop in my thread, which you can see right there. I'm going to go into the loop to create a knot, pull that loop tight and create a knot, just like so. You could do that a few more times. I think that'll probably be good. Then to trim the thread, you want to put your needle into the seam towards the center of the blanket and just leave it there. Just kidding. Don't leave your needle in the blanket. That would hurt. Then you're going to pull the needle out a side of the blanket. So you can kind of see. I'm pulling it out the smooth side, and I'm pulling all that extra thread to the inside of the blanket, and then I'm going to tug, get the slack out of my thread and trim. And now my knot is totally hidden and my stitches are pretty much hidden, which is awesome. So now my cozy fuzzy blanket is back in action. It's ready to snuggle me on the sofa watching movies with the family. And if you are looking for more mending projects, I am linking to a playlist right here that I have of several different things for how to fix your hammock, your backpack, your stuffed animal, and a few other things. So check it out.